Welcome back to another episode of Why Are We Like This, the podcast that treats Florida like the active crime scene it is. I'm your host, Gerald Doherty, joined as always by my co-hosts Tomas Kennedy and David Quinones. We start off a news roundup episode with the biggest item of the day. Honey, I Shrunk the Economy. That's right, the U.S. economy, for reasons that only science may hold the answers to, contracted 0.3% over the last quarter, a 2.7 downward swing from the 2.4% growth rate posted in December 2024. This from Reuters. Economists had forecast that GDP had increased at a 0.3% pace in the January-March period. The survey was, however, concluded before the data on Tuesday of last week showed the goods trade deficit surged to an all-time high in March amid record imports, which prompted most economists to sharply downgrade their GDP estimates. Consumer confidence is near 5-year lows and business sentiment has tanked. Airlines have pulled their 2025 financial forecasts, citing uncertainty over spending on non-essential travel because of tariffs, which economists have warned will raise costs for companies and households. Given that an unusually large amount of non-monetary gold had accounted for some of the jump in imports, some economists warned against placing too much weight on the GDP number. Others argue that the data did not change the narrative of an economy struggling because of uncertainty due to tariffs. Always humble in deflecting credit for spectacular news, President Trump insisted on Truth Social that the stock market, which was down on the reports, actually belonged to Joe Biden, and that it would be some time before the economy would become fully his. This, of course, contradicts his truths from last year, in which he insisted the strong market in 2024 was entirely due to his expected election in November. So, guys, we have some trouble. The economy is doing not great. But it seems we don't know why this is happening. It seems to be a very big mystery. I just wanted to offer it up to you guys. If we could help these economists solve the mystery as to why an economy that was growing in December is suddenly shrinking in May. Tomas, you're on mute.
You're mute.
Before we do that,
yes.
Have we seen any boomer lib style memes saying "Honey, I Shrunk the Economy"?
None that I've seen.
It's so good. I gotta laugh out of that.
All right, we'll work on some related content, some OC.
Make the meme, Gerald.
We'll do it.
You know, I think I had a meme once for an episode of us. It was a Honey, I Shrunk the
voter registration numbers.
You know what? How about this? I'll just cross out voter registration and economy, and I'll swap it in for the next episode.
Yes, bipartisan. First we hit the Dems, and then
there we go.
Gerald, I know that this is a lot to keep up with, but one thing you missed in your intro was that I think in an interview, literally the next day, Trump said well, the good parts. He just came out and said the good parts are
the
mine.
good parts are Trump and the bad parts are Biden. This is Schrodinger's economy.
That's a great way to go through life. I'm gonna adopt that strategy.
It's just Protestantism. It's anything good that happens is because of me, and anything bad that happens.
All right, the suspense is killing me.
Yeah.
What happened to the economy, Joe?
Yep.
Something happened.
All right, so this is my theory, and it's only a working theory, but I have a feeling that when the price of a Nintendo Switch 2 went from the high 300s to the mid 600s, that you had an army of 12-year-olds telling their parents, all of whom are economists, that things are dire. Just scanning Reddit, which is where 12-year-olds tend to... And these 12-year-olds are future voters.
12-year-olds are on Reddit?
12-year-olds are all on Reddit. That's the lifeblood of Reddit.
Reddit is mostly 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's insane.
No, it's pretty clear that people who don't know what the price of a commodity is going to be from day to day, based on what exemptions are being given out to what country, on what basis, for what reason, people are not able to price in what their costs are going to be. And I think that obviously it's not even just the tariff. The tariffs alone, yes, but it is just the mercurial, day-to-day transactional nature of how the tariffs are being talked about. Not even changed or altered, but just talked about as, maybe they go away soon. Maybe if we make a good deal, they'll go away. So that prices people to expect, okay, maybe by the summertime, everything will go back to normal. But I haven't seen any motion or movement that's going to happen. So I don't even know if yes, it's the tariffs, but it's also the way he's implementing them, which is just in this very haphazard, whoever pisses me off the most in a given day is getting the tariffs, and who knows who that's going to be on a given day. So I think it's really it's the policy, but it's the mercurial implementation of the policy that's causing a lot of business uncertainty.
Yeah, in like my space of corporate communications, one of the things that we have to do a lot of times in PR and all of that is like you kind of have to draft out statements for whatever the anticipated spectrum of outcomes could be for the coming quarter. And I use the example of like a sub discipline in my area with investor relations, which is kind of like its own thing. But like they have to write out these earnings calls way before the final results are in, and they have multiple drafts of like here's what. When we get the last numbers from like our last tranche of data, like here's how it might change or whatever in the next week. And so you go in to, if you've ever recorded an earnings call, you go in with like 4 or 5 different versions for like one paragraph. They'll try to stuff in all the sort of fungible stuff into one paragraph, so you can just have the CEO read that 4 times. The clients that I have given up on trying to do that because there's no way to know what like the spectrum is too big of what the potential outcomes. So like it's happened more than a few times in the last month where I've had clients that were just like, you know what, can you draft out a bunch of different language, like an array of language for us, or let's just hold off until the end of Q2 and we'll write it when it. And imagine trying to run a business that way, run like a corporation or whatever, or run an economy where like you can't anticipate anything. You have no idea. Like you open a door number 3 and it could be a lion or it could be a birthday cake. That's
like, what America voted for. They wanted a guy that was going to run the country like a business.
I keep forgetting that part. We voted for this. We wanted this.
You wanted.
A majority of us wanted this.
Except this is not how you run a business.
All right.
Government, or anything really.
We also have some action by way of lack of action in the Hope Florida scandal from last week's episode. The Florida legislature has declined to designate the First Lady of Florida's charity a program under the governor's office this session after it was revealed to be a near pass-through for off-the-books campaign spending, though the Florida GOP has signaled it will pick up where it is leaving off next legislative session, leaving working-class Floridians to wonder silently, why are my friends always fighting? From Florida politics. Simply put, there's no question that these were Medicaid funds steered by the governor's chief of staff through secret and clandestine actions to his own political committee. This is Republican Representative Andrade. It's readily apparent that a culture of neglect, incompetence, and entitlement exists within the halls of the governor's office. Andrade told Florida Politics he plans to file legislation next session to strengthen Florida's laws about misspending Medicaid funds and more. Meanwhile, the DeSantises accused the House GOP of making politically motivated attacks against Hope Florida. Ron DeSantis. Why are they doing this narrative? They're not doing it because they really care about that. They're trying to do is impugn Hope Florida. They're trying to smear this program. Some of these lefty journalists don't like it. They don't like you working with the faith-based community. Some of these people view it as a way to attack the First Lady and all the great things she's done because they view her as a threat. So that's what's motivating this.
Guys, can I add a little sweetener to this story?
By all means.
Okay, so first of all, amazing that the Florida legislature refuses to codify the Hope Florida grift. Finally, some pushback against the asshole First Family of Florida. But I don't know if you guys saw on the Florida Trident this delicious story. Lee County Sheriff Marceno trashes Ron and Casey DeSantis in vulgar audio. Did you guys see this?
No,
I missed this.
So they recorded this guy who's, definitely was a political hit because he wants to run for Congress.
Sure.
He's a Republican, Lee County. Definitely got recorded, and this is released, to make his life a little bit more complicated. But he called DeSantis, and don't cancel me. These are his words, not mine. Quote,
get the button ready, Gerald.
Quote, fucking Down syndrome asshole.
Whoa.
I think there's really something wrong with that guy. I really do. You have to look at his eyes. Look at his eyes.
Damn.
And then wait. On a second audio, they talk about Casey DeSantis, and there is a bit of contention here because one person is saying that Casey is hot, which
Okay.
I concur. She's a
Yes.
good-looking woman. But Marceno says she's disgusting.
Mm.
Her
That's
nails
petty.
are fucked up. They're rough. Her nails are fucked up. So I think that's a bit egregious. I think
Yeah.
Wait a second.
is a good-looking woman. A piece of shit, a good-looking woman.
He doth protest too much, if that's his complaint.
That's a weird.
Yeah. Busted nails is like, okay, you're going for the Pride, like the June Pride vote, which I don't know is a major constituency.
I'll just go out
on. I'll just paradise, folks.
I'll just go out on a limb and say that like he's noticing some things that I wouldn't normally think that a
this is some
Republican sheriff would notice on a.
I'll just say non-hetero norm noticing.
Yeah,
I'll just say.
Yeah, anyway.
Which is fine, but
it's fine. Look, first of all, it's fine. It's great if that's what he's noticing. Good for him. I hope he lives his truth.
Yeah,
he's also weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is cool again.
Listen, he sounds
Trump one.
He sounds to me like a guy who was maybe the happiest when the YMCA dance became du jour among the MAGA faithful. So I'll say I support his. I don't support his content, but I do support his spirit.
But
one of the few not doing it ironically.
These Florida sheriffs are wilding out. If you guys want to read the story, FloridaTrident.com. Lee County Sheriff Marceno doing ableism against the DeSantises.
Can we just go back really quick? Like because Tomas, this is kind of almost like I don't want to get into the topic of what we were talking about pre-show, but like this is sort of like what we were talking about of like who are the lefties that were like really put like I mean like yeah sure I'm sure if you're on the left like you.
I've never heard of Hope Florida before this scandal. Like right. I didn't like I'm in New York. I'm not supposed to know about it. Now I know about it. What?
Hope Florida in this podcast.
No, I know, but I'm saying we've talked about it in relation to the governor's offices. I'm saying for everyday people, no one has heard. It's not like, Rose Law Firm. It's not like Dick Cheney and Halliburton, where it's you say the word and you know who you're talking. If someone says Hope Florida, until now, no one would have known what you're referring to. Now they know.
Well, I would say, like 90% of Floridians obviously still don't know what Hope Florida is, but they have. If Casey runs against Byron Donalds or whatever, they're gonna know. Yeah, they're gonna know because there's gonna be a fucking $10 million TV ad buy saying that, Ron and Casey DeSantis grifting with Medicaid settlement money.
If Rick's
money through their fake charity.
If Rick Scott comes out for Byron Donalds, will his line be that it's okay to defraud Medicare but not to defraud Medicaid funds? Is it going to be like an ideological thing of we're for the poor but against the elderly?
He'll probably say what he's like. Look, I didn't do anything. It was got away hands free with the golden parachute.
I'm imagining like a all of the sort of like emotional videos and content that we've seen about like over the course of the last few months with Doge defunding all of these charities and non-for-profits and I'm just trying to think of like a version of like the poor defunded end recipients of Hope Florida, and it's just like a bunch of media TV executives and stuff, and they're like oh, I don't know what I'm going to do without that $3 million bump next election year. We might have to lay off a few reporters, we might have to sell a few camera trucks, we might have to cut back over here at WSVN without them pumping these millions of dollars because that's really what the end recipient of all that money is the media companies
that's true,
where they buy all of the ads from, because that's what it ended up being.
It's true, and that's actually we should talk about this in the podcast one day, and I'm not going to name names, but all of my friends in the media journalism ecosystem, since Florida stopped being a swing state, it's actually really hurt radio, TV, particularly Spanish TV, because there's so much less money being spent on advertisements every 2 years.
You're not able to charge the rates you were used to when this was the hottest swing state.
And there isn't the demand, at all.
For radio, it's been a killer, absolute killer, especially AM radio.
One piece of legislation that is moving forward is a statewide fluoride ban, unwittingly turning Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava into the William Wallace of having teeth. From U.S. News and World Report, Florida state lawmakers have approved a bill to ban the addition of fluoride to public drinking water, a move that public health experts say could harm dental health across the state. The bill now heads to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for approval. DeSantis has criticized fluoridation in the past, calling it forced medication. The aim of fluoridation is to prevent tooth decay, especially in kids. Very quick, I know we don't want to spend too much on fluoride because we already talked about it at the county level, now to be superseded at the state level. I'll be on. Go ahead.
And it was overridden at the county level, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah. So which is all anyway.
Not much to say about this. I'll be on. I guess this is now that MAGA has achieved their main goal, which is just the re-election of Donald Trump. The only politics they have now is Maha, and I don't think you can't convince me that when DeSantis was a Tea Party guy, or even in his early Trump days, that he thought about fluoride in water even once.
It's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's so embarrassing.
This is part of his folly that he's always had, where he has to jump in on the super online internet shit.
It's just like clapping seal, like brain dead shit, and all of his like diminishing pool of supporters that are still gassing him up on Twitter. Again, just all like mindless, moronic clapping seal. The fluoride, the fluoride. So fucking dumb.
All right, should we pivot now to
let's do it.
The later half? All right. So what are?
I would just like switch it over to Tomas, right? Tomas, do you want to bring us up to date on the but you got to do it, Gerald, because you've sort of
okay.
Right. But just like kind of kick it to Tomas,
sure,
because he's fresh back from Miami. From Tallahassee.
Very good. Yep. Okay. All right, Tomas, you are fresh back from Tallahassee. The state legislative session winding down. What do you have for us? What do we need to know?
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is this can be a bit of a more optimistic episode than usual, because it was actually like I wouldn't say a good session, but from what we've covered in the past, experienced in the past, this was a much better session than past years. Not almost all, but a good number of the bills that we would consider to be harmful ended up dying. All of the anti-reproductive health bills, including one that basically made it a requirement to inform parents of any sort of medical procedure of diagnosis that a minor may have, which of course would not be good if a teenager has an STD and can't get it treated because you have like psycho-religious parents, right?
Right.
That bill died. We in the immigration space, we were working to kill a number of bills with a number of coalition partners, of course, but the bill to classify workers as interns to pay them below the minimum wage,
I forgot about that.
Died. The bill to further gut child labor protections in Florida so that minors could work before 6 a.m. and after 11 p.m. without breaks, that bill died. A bill to remove any liabilities for pesticide manufacturers, that bill died. And actually a bunch of right-wing figures came out against it, including Matt Gaetz, believe it or not.
Damn.
E-Verify, right, to check the status of the legal status of immigrant workers in Florida. We killed that bill. A bill that basically would have made it impossible for unaccompanied minors who were victims of abuse to seek a refuge in Florida. That bill died. It was all the immigration stuff was gutted out of it. We got it amended out. So, it's been overall it's been a lot less harmful than other years.
Sure.
Tomas, what do you like the death or the like lack of progress on all those bills that you just said? Like what percentage of it, or how often amongst them do you attribute that to, constituency outreach and yelling at people over the phone, and versus like backroom kind of negotiating that kills so many bills like that because of like unrelated reasons and horse trading and shit like that?
Yeah, and the one bad bill that did pass, not just one, but the major bad bill that passed was, of course, bill restricting ballot initiative processes in the state, right? So it's going to be a lot more difficult to be able to place a constitutional amendment like the one raising the minimum wage or restoring voting rights for people with prior felony convictions. That's going to be a lot harder now because they basically shortened the amount of time which you have to return signed petitions. There's a bunch of different fees and criminal penalties involved in the process. There's a $1 million deposit that organizations have to put before they even start. So they definitely made it harder, not impossible. To your question, David, I think it's obviously there was a lot of media attention on some of the bills that they were trying to push, including like the child labor stuff, right? I mean, that got really, really, really bad headlines. E-Verify, for example, I think that's sort of like crashing into like the economic interest of the state in a way that they're not ready to push that button yet, right? Because it would collapse the economy, especially amid worker shortages in the state. But I think it's a mixture of everything, right? I think it's a mixture of just this is a bad headline. This is a headache for us. We know we're going to come into next year midterm with Trump at the top of not the ballot, but of the government. And midterm elections tend to skew against, the party in power in the executive branch, even though here in Florida, we buck that trend often because Democrats just lose. But I think they are
We'll
worried.
find a way to lose.
And I think more than anything is they just are not ready to take any more bullets or suffer any more headaches for DeSantis, right? Like the child labor bill. That was something that, McKenna Schuller, right, who's a friend of the pod from the Orlando Weekly, she's been on the show. She got emails showing how it originated from DeSantis's office. And then when DeSantis asked about it, he just blatantly says, yeah, no, we're doing this to replace the migrant workers that we've scared off the state. Those, I think Republican representatives and senators in Tallahassee are just kind of done with him, and we're not going to prioritize this when we have so much else to do, and everything's already so chaotic at the federal level, if that makes sense.
It also, can we drill down on E-Verify? I asked because 12 years ago, something like E-Verify was being pitched as like a common sense part of like the bipartisan immigration debates in the Senate in the second Obama term. It is significant to me that a state that is a deeper shade of red than Oklahoma with supermajorities for the GOP could not pass E-Verify. And yet I also think that most people, unless they have studied the issue closely, if you ask them what is E-Verify, I don't think they could tell you what it is other than it's some sort of electronic checking system.
Well, Gerald, remember, we did pass E-Verify. We just passed it with a shit ton of loopholes. We
Okay.
passed it for companies that have 25 or more employees. There's a bunch of visa loopholes. There are a bunch of loopholes in terms of when it actually is enforced, because people have up until the third day of hiring to actually run the Verify system. And when it's actually enforced by the state, it's not even funded. This year, it came to light that since it was passed in 2023, there had only been 8 enforcement notices in
Wow.
2 years. So even if you pass it, these things are usually not enforced because, again, it crashes into the economic reality of the state and the country. And the reality of the state and the country is that we have, again, worker shortages. We have a bunch of industries with jobs that nobody wants to do, that are low pay, they have low wages, and the work needs to get done, right? I mean, the crops need to be harvested, they need to be packed, they need to be shipped, they need to be placed in supermarkets. Same thing with meat packing, with nurseries, with construction. So, until they are ready to vastly increase wages to attract US citizens to those kind of jobs. And then on top of that, you need to subsidize the price increases that paying those higher wages will cause. There's really no solution to this. So that makes sense, because I mean, how much are you going to have to pay a US citizen for them to go out
Right.
into the field
Yeah.
and pick watermelons, right? Or pick tomatoes? Well, that cost later gets
Passed on to the
passed on
consumer.
to the consumers. We do this in America, right? We subsidize the price of eggs since the 1970s. We subsidize a ton of different crops, so we're going to have to subsidize it even more. And that's not a conversation we're ready to have either. So until then, don't expect to see an actual enforceable version of E-Verify in your state.
There was a conversation that started a long time ago. This documentary came out like it had to be like, I don't know, 2002 or something. It was called A Day Without Mexicans. And it was just very like straightforward kind of like liberal stuff about like, pro immigration, pro like, hey, let's not demonize immigrants type stuff, like very early 2000s coded stuff. And I've always wondered since then, like why as like that the temperature is turned up against, you know, people who are in the country undocumented, and as the acrimony and like the violence towards them and the like, now it's like we're at a point where people are threatening to call ICE on each other on fucking social media and shit. Why has there still never been any rancor towards, like, if you're a principled, whatever, conservative MAGA person, why are you still giving a pass to the people who hire this horde of invaders from the South that you hate? Like, why do the people that run I will never get that. And I know it's like, it feels like a very like early 2000s lib take to say, but like today in 2025, with the way things are and how angry the right is and how vengeful the last like 4 or 5 months have been or felt, like I'll never understand.
Well, personally, I mean, I don't care because I'm an open borders person, right? So I think people should just come here and take jobs.
No, yeah, I'm saying, like, assuming that position.
No, I know.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I think those people should be legalized so they can have labor protections and be able to work, and things can be done, not under the table, etc., right? Not like in the black market or in like the hidden economy. But I mean, to your point, I don't know. I just don't think there's really any alternative. We don't have an alternative economic model, right? We don't have an alternative solution to how things would function without immigrant labor, right? And to your point, I saw Joe Gruters, who's a very, very MAGA Republican senator. We've talked about him in this podcast during session, and I saw him a bunch of times during session. But during one time, we talked about the in-state tuition and how they removed that tuition waiver for the undocumented kids here in Florida. And I was like, what you guys did to those kids is horrible. I mean, it really is cruel and mean what you guys did. And he was like, well, it's in the past, and now what we have to do is we have to fundraise from the private sector to help these kids. And I'm like, yeah, you need to fundraise $45 million. Like, that's not going to happen. You're being extremely disingenuous.
Yeah, I'm sure that's on his like to-do list today. Like, I'm sure he's going to be working on that.
But what I told him was, here in this legislature, people like you have a lot of compassion for employers who make illegal hires, and not so much compassion for the employees and students who are immigrants and undocumented. And personally, I don't want any sort of enforcement against even the companies that make illegal hires, because I just don't think that cracking down there solves anything. It just actually makes the economy worse and prevents people from working and creates more misery. But I told him, like, I literally said, I dare you to pass any of the 3 E-Verify bills that are currently in the legislature that we're opposing. I was like, you are not going to do it, because everything that you guys do in immigration is a dog and pony show. It's all smoke and mirrors, but you are never going to go after the people that write your checks and that, run the fucking state. You're just never gonna do it. And he literally, what he said was, I've co-sponsored those bills. And I'm like, yeah, but why are you guys speed through anti-immigrant bills in this legislature? How come you guys can't do the actual enforceable E-Verify? And I'm telling you as an opponent, but why is it that you guys can't do this bill? Honestly, like, where is the political will to do this one bill that you guys have been trying to do for years? And that was, you're right, that was Pizzo's question, who I hated how he went about it, with this like language around illegal aliens and, it's like right-wing coded MAGA language. I think it was disgusting. But he was asking a valid question, which is, why is this the one bill that can't get done?
Also, just doubly disingenuous for him to say we need to focus on the private sector to fundraise for these kids. If the Waltons announced they were donating $45 million so that undocumented kids could go to school, there would be a boycott of Walmart tomorrow. What is he talking about?
Well, I guess a piece of shit.
Yeah.